People imagine Viking battles as a world of men, bearded warriors, heavy shields, axes crashing into wood and bone. But imagine this instead. You are standing on a frozen battlefield 1,000 years ago. The air is sharp. The ground is stained dark. And in front of you, raising a shield, is a warrior you were never taught to expect. Not a myth, not a symbol. A woman, trained for war, stepping forward without hesitation. For centuries, historians told us this never happened. That Viking women stayed behind while men fought and died. That Shieldmaidens were nothing more than legends created by storytellers. But what if history was wrong? What if the truth was buried, misread, or deliberately ignored? And what if the most dangerous Viking warrior was someone history chose to forget? To understand this question, we must first understand Viking society itself. Viking women were not powerless figures hidden in the background of history. Compared to most of medieval Europe, they held remarkable rights. They could own property, inherit land, demand divorce, and control households and businesses. When men sailed away on raids or voyages that lasted months or even years, women ran farms, managed wealth, and made critical decisions. Strength, responsibility, and independence were expected of them. This was not a fragile society. It was a harsh world where survival mattered more than rigid roles. And in such a world, ability often mattered more than gender. The idea of women warriors appears repeatedly in Old Norse literature. These women were known as Shieldmaidens. They carried weapons, trained for combat, and fought alongside men. In the Sagas, they are fearless, disciplined, and sometimes even commanders. One of the most famous figures is Lagertha, described as a warrior, a leader, and a ruler in her own right. For a long time, figures like her were dismissed as pure fiction. After all, the sagas were written centuries after the Viking Age ended. They are filled with gods, omens, and exaggeration. But myths rarely appear without a foundation, and the persistence of Shieldmaidens across different stories, regions, and generations suggests something deeper than fantasy. For decades, archaeology seemed to support the traditional view. Graves with weapons were labeled male. Graves with jewelry were labeled female. The pattern appeared simple and unquestioned, until one burial forced historians to rethink everything. At the Viking settlement of Birka, archaeologists uncovered an elite warrior grave. Inside were a sword, an axe, arrows, 2 war horses, and a board game used for planning military strategy. This was not a ceremonial burial. This was the grave of a professional warrior, someone who likely held authority and command. For over 100 years, it was assumed the warrior was male. No one questioned it. Then DNA testing was performed. The result was undeniable. The warrior was biologically female. This discovery shocked the academic world, not because the evidence was weak, but because it challenged long-held assumptions. For generations, weapons automatically meant men. Female skeletons found with arms were often reclassified, ignored, or explained away as ritual symbols. The Birka warrior forced historians to confront an uncomfortable truth. Bias had shaped interpretation. And once that door opened, another question followed. How many other female warriors were misidentified? How many were erased, not by time, but by assumption? But archaeology is not the only place where clues appear. Viking law itself tells an important story. In Norse society, violence was regulated, not forbidden. Honor mattered more than mercy. A woman had the legal right to defend herself, her household, and her family with force. In some cases, she was expected to. A woman who failed to protect her home could lose status. A woman who succeeded gained respect. This legal acceptance of violence as duty makes the idea of women taking up arms far less radical than it appears to modern eyes. Training is another often ignored factor. In small Viking communities, survival depended on everyone understanding weapons. Boys trained early, but girls were not always excluded. Hunting, defending livestock, and protecting settlements during raids required skill with blades, spears, and bows. A woman who showed talent could develop it, especially in families of warriors, where martial knowledge was passed down rather than formally taught. War was not an abstract profession. It was a skill set learned at home. There is also the psychological dimension. For Viking enemies, the appearance of female warriors would have been deeply unsettling. Medieval European armies were built on rigid gender roles. Facing a woman in battle shattered expectations. It created fear, confusion, and shame. Some foreign chroniclers describe Viking women as unnatural or monstrous. But these descriptions say more about the writers than the warriors. They reflect shock, not fantasy. To them, a woman who fought was proof that the Vikings lived outside the natural order. Religion also played a role. Viking beliefs did not strictly separate masculine and feminine virtues. Courage, strength, and honor were human traits, not male ones. Even in death, women could achieve glory. The afterlife rewarded bravery, not gender. This worldview made space for exceptional individuals to exist outside social norms without being rejected by them. So did Viking women fight in battle? The honest answer is complex. There is no evidence that women made up a large portion of Viking armies. Most warriors were male. But there is clear evidence that some women fought, some were trained, and some held positions of authority. Shieldmaidens were likely rare individuals, exceptional figures who stepped into the role of warrior due to skill, circumstance, or necessity. In times of crisis, when survival was at stake, Viking society appears to have been far more flexible than later historians believed. The Viking world was built on honor, strength, and reputation. A warrior was defined not by birth alone, but by ability and courage. The Sagas exaggerated these women, turning them into legends. But archaeology, law, and cultural logic have shown that the core of those legends was real. Shieldmaidens were not common, but they were not imaginary. They existed at the edge of tradition, where myth and reality met. So were Viking Shieldmaidens truth or myth? They were not fantasy. They were not symbols invented by modern culture. They were real women in a brutal world, capable of violence, leadership, and war. And for centuries, history simply chose not to see them. Sometimes, the most dangerous warrior is not the one charging forward with an axe. It is the one whose story was buried, rewritten, and nearly forgotten.